Congratulations, you just got a shiny new iPhone 16 Pro or 16 Pro Max, and while your wallet's a little light, your heart's a little heavy thinking about the fact that your bare naked iPhone is vulnerable and susceptible. So slapping a case on it is probably the best thing you can do for it. But there's so many out there, and it's hard to tell which one's good and which one's not. Fortunately for you, I've been trying out a ton of iPhone cases this past week or so, and I've narrowed down the list to 7 awesome cases that I think are worth checking out, so let's talk about them. Starting off with Elago's silicone case. I honestly pity the fool who pays full price for Apple's official silicone case when you can get this bad boy right here for a fraction of the price and with literally the same quality, if not slightly better. Sure, it comes in simple packaging, but it's what's inside that counts, right? Over here we have it in the medium gray color, and there are a number of other colors available, by the way. Now you'll notice on the inside you have a soft cloth fabric like material to keep the phone cozy and protected. This iteration doesn't have MagSafe compatibility, but for a couple bucks more, you can get the MagSafe compatible version as well, which I highly recommend you do. Anyway, once you put the phone inside, it fits tightly, it's snug, it's not going anywhere. You'll notice you have moderately raised lips over here, and these lips do a pretty decent job at keeping your phone protected from scratches across a flat surface when face down, as well as on a slightly uneven surface as well, without looking too intrusive. Now on the sides, you'll notice you have buttons, and they are coated with the same silicone material. Now that is a pro on its own, but unfortunately these buttons don't have additional tactility to them, which means that they do make the overall clicks feel a little bit more mushy than you might like. On the other side, again, the power button also has a silicone coating, slightly mushy again with not too much tactility, but you will notice you have a nice large cutout for the camera action button, but it's not overexposed, and you have a natural indent as well, which is nice to see. On the bottom side of the case, I love the fact that you have individual cutouts for the speakerphone and microphone, which is a nice attention to detail, a nice large USB-C port cutout as well, so it's highly compatible with all sorts of cable sizes. And then on the back side, you have that smooth silicone feeling. It's not like, it doesn't have any special texture to it, but it just feels really smooth, and it's sleek as well, and same quality as Apple's silicone case. You'll also notice that the actual lining or lips around the camera lenses are relatively tall, so they're obviously taller than the lens, and they provide a decent degree of protection, so it should be scratch free when it's facing downward. Overall, guys, the reason Elago's case is so good is because it's highly accessible through Amazon. It costs like a fraction compared to Apple's own silicone case, and it delivers the exact same quality, and it comes in a ton of colors. It's honestly a win-win silicone case. If you're looking for something that's slightly more on the aesthetic side and you don't mind compromising too much on protection, there are few cases that look as appealing as Pitaka's cases. They really became popular last year with the release of the iPhone 15 Pro series, and these guys have been doing hotcake kind of activities since then. Now, as you can see, it comes in some pretty cool packaging. This right here is the tactile woven case with the Milky Way design, I believe. Open it up, and inside right away, what a stunning case. Take that out. Now, you will notice this thing is very thin. It's essentially a skeleton case, right, with minimalist protective value, but a lot of aesthetic value. And let's put the phone in over here, and you'll see you get a nice tight fit. It's not as tight as the silicone case, but it's definitely secure and in place. Now, you do have very small lips across the bezel, so they are slightly higher than the bezel, even though the camera doesn't do a good job of showing it. It'll provide you with minimal protection on a flat surface, but again, this is not a rugged case by any standard of the word, but it does keep the organic look of the display because it's not very intrusive. Now, one thing you'll notice is on the sides over here with the tactile woven case, you have fully exposed buttons and a little bit of exposed body as well with the side bezel or side frame. Now, you will keep the tactility of the buttons, which is a good thing. However, you won't get any protection in that attribute. Same thing with the other side where you have the power button. Again, it's completely exposed over here, so you keep the full organic tactility of the buttons, but that comes at the cost of exposure. My biggest gripe with this case, however, is the fact that the actual camera action button is overexposed. They could have kept a much smaller cutout here, but they kind of opted to include a larger one, which means that it's more prone to scratches in those areas. On the bottom side, again, you'll notice you have pretty standard cutouts for the microphone and speakerphone, and then again, a slightly overexposed USB-C port cutout over here, which could have been a little bit smaller and tighter, but you'll have maximum compatibility with any cable on the bright side. Now, on the back side of this case is where things really do start looking up. I mean, firstly, this case feels so nice. So basically, Pitaka uses camrid fiber, or that's what they market it as, with PCB coating over it, and it gives this really nice texture. It's kind of smooth and silky, but at the same time it has these natural bumps. It's amazing. Aesthetically, I love this design, and some of their other case designs are also absolutely amazing. The abstract art is on point here, and surprisingly though, you do get a pretty thick lip around the cameras over here, which means you get a decent degree of protection. So when it's face down, it'll definitely protect it on a flat surface and even a slightly uneven surface as well. Now, generally speaking, you probably got the gist by now. Aesthetically, this case is so darn good looking, but you have to be okay with minimalist protection over here. It is a slim case, and on top of that, it's definitely focused towards just looking good more than anything else, with some degree of protection, of course. Perhaps you're the kind of person who prefers a even more minimalist case. In that case, no pun intended, you should seriously consider getting the tax standard 4.0 case. This thing is totally sleek. I mean, as far as thin cases go, this thing is at the epitome of it. So right out of the box, you can see this thing is paper thin. It's a shell case. It's designed not to add any bulk to your phone whatsoever. Of course, that does also mean that it's very shy in nature. It doesn't have a lot of protective elements. With that said, when you do put your phone into it though, it fits tightly. It doesn't feel loose. It might look like it's not being held by a lot, but it's sufficiently in there and it's not gonna fall off. Obviously, you get very thin lips around the corners here, and the clearance is just slightly more than the actual display itself, which means that your phone retains a very organic look. You know, the display looks stunning. You're not compromising on the looks of the bezel or the display itself, but of course you also have minimal clearance when you have this thing on a flat surface face down. Now, you will notice on the sides, the buttons over here also have a plastic encasing, which is nice, so they didn't just leave them naked or exposed. And I also like the fact that you actually have pressure points on the button, which means you actually retain most of the tactility from the actual buttons of the iPhone, which gives that nice clicky feel that people often want. Same thing with the power button on the other side. You have that clicky feel thanks to those pressure points. And you'll notice you have a pretty straightforward cutout for the camera action button over here. It doesn't have any indent because the case is obviously too thin, but it's pretty nice overall. Now on the bottom side, you'll notice you actually have individual cutouts for the speakerphone as well as the microphone. I love the attention to detail over here. And then you have a medium-sized cutout for the Type-C port, which means most cables from medium to large sizes should be compatible with this thing without any issues. The back side, you're gonna notice you have essentially a very rough frosted finish here. So the texture is slightly matte, slightly more rough, but not too rough by any means. And if you actually like a frosted finish, you'll appreciate this for sure. Now, what really impressed me the most with this case is, despite being so sleek in nature, it actually has a lot of protection around the camera. So obviously you have the lip itself over here, which has decent clearance and will definitely protect the lenses. However, you also have a lot of plastic around the actual lenses themselves and all the open exposed areas that often are, not covered with other cases. The result is this thing actually retains a lot of its look, but also protects it from dust as well as scratches. And I think that's a huge factor for such a slim case that you often don't find with other minimalist cases. Overall, if you want a minimum bulk kind of case that actually provides decent protection for what it is, then a TAC case is definitely one I can actually vouch for. I've used them in the past, and these things definitely last a long time. And they also seem to be slightly more moisture as well as fingerprint resistant this year. So that's a solid A+ from my end. If you're the more classy leather kind of person, well, I gotta tell you, Andar's Aspen case is often considered the gold standard as far as iPhone leather cases go, and for good reason. I've owned them in the past and they definitely last a long time. They come in some pretty environmentally friendly packaging, but the good news is that they do use authentic leather for most of their products, which to me is a big deal. Now immediately, that camel tan color here looks so vivid. I love it. It has that goody leather feeling to it. Let's talk about the inside real quick. You do have a soft fabric finishing on the inner side, which means you get some decent protection for your iPhone in the unfortunate event that you do drop it. You also have the MagSafe ring over here, which means you have full MagSafe compatibility. Now, when you put your phone in for the first time, it's going to have a very tight fit, almost excessively tight, but this is by design because leather cases do loosen up over time. So it's important that, companies account for the fact that it's going to loosen up and it doesn't become too loose so the phone starts falling out. So this is a good thing. Now, you'll notice you actually do have slightly pronounced lips over here. However, maybe it's the color or perhaps the way the lips kind of protrude inwards. They don't necessarily dominate the display of the iPhone, and they, if anything, complement the bezels, which gives this very nice and refreshing look. Now, on the sides, you have the machine cut buttons, the metal machine cut buttons might I add, not only do they feel premium, my goodness are they tactile. I mean, they're more tactile than the base buttons on the phone itself, which just feels really clicky and really nice. The only thing worth mentioning is that these buttons are really pronounced. I know some people don't like overly pronounced buttons, so they do stick out a fair bit from the base body itself. Now, the one gripe I have with this case is that they do have an overexposed area around the camera button. I know the camera button itself can't be covered, but I definitely think they could have covered a little bit more area here to further reduce the chances of getting scratches on the side bezels. On the bottom side, you have pretty standard cutouts for the speakerphone as well as the microphone. And then you have a nice large cutout for the Type-C port over here, which of course is good because you get maximum cable compatibility. Now, on the back side, look, since this thing is real leather, you have that nice semi-sticky feel that you expect with a leather case. Right now, it feels tight and obviously, close-knit, but over time, this thing is going to get loose, and it only looks more and more stunning as time goes on, which is something that makes leather cases unique. They actually kind of appreciate in value as time goes on, unlike a lot of other cases that start looking worse for wear. Now, you'll also notice that you have a pretty nice black contrast lip around the lenses over here, and this looks really nice as well, but also provides a decent degree of protection. You've got some good clearance. It should be fine on most even as well as slightly uneven surfaces when face down. Now, Andar cases are generally very high quality, which also means they have a pretty hefty price tag, but despite this, I think these are the kind of cases you get if you just want to buy one iPhone case and you want it to last for pretty much the entire duration of the device or for a long period anyway. They're going to age because that's the nature of leather, and they look graceful as they age, which is very unique to leather cases as well. They come in other colors like the navy blue color that I'm showing over here, and they have a couple of other options which you can check out on their website. If you prefer a more modern take with a greater emphasis on protection, then Mujjo is often a great consideration when it comes to leather cases. So their shield case is the one I really want to talk about. So obviously it comes in some pretty nice packaging. Once you slide it out, you'll notice we have it in the steel blue color over here. And the cool thing about the shield case is that while it's a bulky case, it still gives you that nice leather feel that you want. So when we take it out, let's start with the inside. You'll notice that you have that soft fabric feel similar to Andar. And you also will notice you have a subtle ring over here, which means you get MagSafe compatibility. Now, when you actually put your phone into this thing, it is so darn tight. It's going to stay in place. It's going to take a black hole to rip your phone away from this case. That's how secure your phone is in this thing. Now, with that said, you obviously do have some pretty thick lips around the bezels over here, which is of course a symptom of most bulky cases, and they do protrude slightly inward. So it does dominate your phone display a little bit, but you get great clearance over here. The result is you're not going to scratch your phone easily on a flat surface or uneven surface, and that's obviously one of the reasons this case is more bulky in nature. You also get some pretty good drop protection. Now on the sides, while you do have a plastic side all around, which is a little interesting to me, you do get machine cut buttons here, just like the Aspen case, which means that it feels premium in that regard, and you have a decent amount of tactility because of the machine trim buttons here. It feels nice and clicky. You also have cutouts for a lanyard if you want to attach that. On the other side, same thing with the power button. It's got a machine trim finishing here. And what I love about this case is that you have a great natural indent on the actual camera button alongside a near perfect cutout, which means it looks clean and crisp. Now on the bottom side, again, you have standard cutouts for the microphone as well as speakerphone, and then you have a nice large cutout for the Type-C port over here, providing great compatibility. On the back side, obviously, is where you have the primary leather element here, and like any other authentic leather case, you've got that semi-sticky feel. It feels nice. It's a little bit more tight and flat and streamlined when compared to Aspen cases in contrast, so it gives it a more modern look, but nonetheless, it's going to age gracefully. What I do find a little interesting is that for a bulky case, you actually have some pretty thin as well as low clearance lips around the camera lens over here. The result is, while it's definitely going to protect your camera on a flat surface, it doesn't have a whole lot of clearance above the lenses themselves, so you might want to be careful around uneven surfaces. Nonetheless, I think that the shield case is probably about as good of a leather case you're going to get if you want a high protection case. You get great drop protection here. You do get that nice premium feel. You're getting a proper premium leather feel as well. And this is definitely a good case to consider. If you want to learn more about it, obviously you can learn more from the links below. Next up, we have a case that I actually use for a good chunk of my ownership of the iPhone 15 Pro. It's just that good, and that's the Benks Kevlar series of cases. Now, I have the gift box edition of this case here, which means I actually get multiple cases in this box, so my packaging might vary from yours if you get a standalone version of this case. The one I specifically want to talk about, however, is the Kevlar 600D case, which is the one I'm unpackaging as we speak. Now, at first glance, it looks like it has a carbon fiber finishing, but that's actually Kevlar material, which is used in bulletproof vests. Now, on the inside, you'll notice you have that same Kevlar material, so they want to keep it nice and consistent. You do have full MagSafe compatibility over here, as you can see with that ring. Now, when you actually take your phone and put it in here, you have a nice tight fit, which obviously means that, you know, your phone is secured, it's not going anywhere. But at the same time, you'll notice that the lips are of medium pronunciation, meaning that they do have a decent amount of clearance and they'll be great across most surfaces when your phone is facing down, but they're not overly pronounced, which means that you still do keep the organic look of your phone's display for the most part. They're not too dominating. I know that's really important for a lot of users who are considering a case. At the same time, you'll notice that you actually have a rubberized side lining over here with the sides, so you get a little bit of extra protection from drops as well. Unfortunately, the buttons also have a rubberized finishing. I say unfortunately because while they are protected, this makes them very soft and mushy. It takes away the tactility of the original buttons. That's a bit of a downside. Same thing with the power button on the other side, though I do love the fact that you have a nice indent for the camera button and the cutout here is perfectly executed as well. You'll also notice that you have standard cutouts for the speakerphone as well as the microphone grill, and then at the center you have a medium-sized cutout for the Type-C port. Now on the back side is where you have the primary Kevlar look over here. It kind of feels like almost like these micro bumps with a very slight rough texture. It's kind of like touching carbon fiber. It's not too far off, but a little bit more smoother than that in my opinion. The only thing I will say is that this case will attract a ton of fingerprints and moisture residue. That's just the nature of Kevlar, so you're going to be cleaning it a lot if you have an OCD for that. My favorite thing about Benks cases in general though is the lips they use around their camera lens. So they seem to really just bring out the camera lens as a much cooler concept because of the way they have those machine cut trims over here. It's pretty nice. You also get a decent amount of clearance, so you have a lot of height here, which means that your camera lens should be protected for the most part when facing down on a flat surface or slightly uneven surface as well. If you want a case with medium protection that actually looks kind of sleek but at the same time is reliable enough to keep your phone safe as long as you're not using like a barbarian, this is definitely a case you should consider. I rocked it for like 9 months I believe, and I absolutely love this case with the iPhone 15 Pro, and I have a feeling that I'm going to be rocking it for a while with the 16 Pro Max as well. The final case on this list is not here because of its aesthetic value nor its protective value, but rather because of its unique modular take, and that is the MagBak Elite Case. First, you just look at the dramatic packaging here. This thing has a solid plastic shell, which is so unique. Anyway, admittedly, it did take me a solid 1 minute to open up this case or figure out how to open it anyway. Once I did though, I immediately realized why it is the way it is. You've obviously got the case itself and all the accessories, but then you also actually have a built-in screen protector which you can install, and the mechanism to install is built into the actual packaging of the case itself, which is really cool. Anyway, coming to the case itself, you'll notice a few things. Firstly, on the inside, you have a soft fabric finish. So obviously, you know, you get a lot of protection in that regard, but you'll also notice this case is modular. So you can replace everything from the actual camera ring itself with a different colored ring to the actual finger loop band with another color. So a lot of customization, which is pretty cool. Anyway, once you put the phone inside, you have a nice tight snuggy fit over here, which is obviously important. And this is a bulky case. You'll notice you have extra padded corners here, so you get a lot of drop protection, which is fantastic. Unfortunately, of course, you are going to have thick fat lips over here on the side. They provide a good amount of clearance, but they definitely creep very close to the display, and they do take away from the large organic look of the display, but that's not anything with this case. That's just a natural symptom of a bulky case that offers a decent degree of protection. Coming to the sides, you'll notice you do have actual plastic encasing for every button to protect it. I was hoping for machine cut metal, but we get plastic instead. The good news is that they're very tactile. They retain their clickiness, which is always a positive. And you'll also notice that you have a very nice cutout for the actual camera button with a very minor indent as well. You also have these rubber grips on either corner over here to maximize gripability, a nice attention to detail. And then additionally, you have individual cutouts at the bottom for the speakerphone as well as the microphone grills. And you have a dedicated lid for the Type-C port to make sure that dirt and other residue doesn't get into it. it. So definitely protection orientated. Now on the back side, you'll notice that you have a rubberized type finish over here, and you have the proprietary magnetic stick system here. I forgot the exact name, but basically this thing can stick onto any magnetic surface. You also have the finger loop band over here, which you can replace like I mentioned earlier, and you have a built-in kickstand with this case, so you can put it in a horizontal position. As you can see, a lot of functionality. Now the only thing I will say is that the lips around the camera lens aren't as high as I was hoping they would be, which means while you do get some degree of protection on a flat surface, on an uneven surface, you're a little bit more risky, so just make sure you keep an eye out if you're keeping this on rough textured surfaces. Overall, I think the MagBak Elite case is really cool for its modular value. You get a lot of customization, being able to change, the camera ring color or the finger loop color, but you also have a lot of practical functionality like the proprietary magnetic system, the kickstand. It's just a great case overall for someone who wants something more unique. And this is where something, I've noticed with MagBak is that they're not afraid to try new things, where a lot of other, case makers tend to stick with the traditional stuff. These guys are bold in their ideas, and that's something that I really have a lot of respect for. That's pretty much it for this list, guys. So let me know what you think of these cases. If you are interested in any of them, I'll have links in the video description below so you can check them out and purchase them if you want to. Also keep in mind this list isn't comprehensive because there's so many cool cases out there. It's impossible for me to include every single one in this list. With that said, if there's one you think I should consider for a part 2 video, let me know in the comment section below and I'll definitely try to check it out. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the content, please consider subscribing to this channel, liking this video. Catch you in the next one.